Two test. Test.
Um,
And then just talk.
Can you hear me?
Okay.
Okay.
Talk like you would.
Oh, okay. Hello. I think I hear it.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's going.
Good morning. Before we get started, I have a couple of announcements. Those of you that were here last month, and we had the lady that we had to call the paramedic squad in for, she's doing fine. So she had, the doctors think, just a sudden change of blood pressure, and she got lightheaded. So the paramedics took her over to the hospital. They checked her out. She went home the same day with her children. They picked up the car from the parking lot. When we had the day trip to the Rep Theater, I saw her, and she's doing fine. So I've had a lot of people ask about her, and I just thought I'd let you know. So she's doing well. The second announcement is downstairs on the table, right when you come in, is a box of DVDs and cassette tapes of music. There's big band, there's Dean Martin, Perry Como, things like that. If you are interested, take them, enjoy them. We don't have the capability to play them anymore, so if you have a cassette player or a DVD player, you're welcome to take any or all of them. So enjoy. We're going to get started here. We have Jan and Jeff from the Missouri Department of Conservation. They're volunteers over at Powder Valley, and they're going to talk to us about how to attract birds to your backyard. I heard a little preview, and you will be hearing some bird calls. So let's give them a big round of applause and welcome.
Thank you for that nice introduction. As you said, we're from the Missouri Department of Conservation over at Powder Valley. And the mission of the Missouri Department of Conservation is to manage state natural resources of fish, the woodlands, the wildlife, and that I hope you've all in your lives have been able to enjoy the outdoors through the Missouri Department of Conservation. The other important mission that we do is these type of programs, to get out in the community, educate people on wildlife and different topics, and hopefully engage you and bring some information you may not be aware of, or we learn from you. I mean, especially a room like this with a lot of life experience. I'm sure you're going to tell me all kinds of things today about the birds you may have come across in your experiences. So with that, we will get started. So I know she mentioned backyard birds, but I also expand this a little bit, just how I enjoy finding and viewing and hearing birds. I've, come to appreciate birds and what they contribute to the environment. I enjoy watching them, listening to them. And so what I'm going to try to do today is give you some of that information, and hopefully you'll take that up as well. So we're going to go forward. So we're going to talk about some resources that would be available to you if you want to observe birds and learn more about birds. And we're going to talk about how to identify different birds, because that's part of the fun in birding, is to look at something and try to figure out what it is and what its behaviors are, and a little bit about it, and what it does for the overall environment. So next. So getting started, you probably have done this throughout your life. Just find a place to sit down, either in your backyard, in a park, and take that time to look around and observe. Birds are obviously a challenge because they fly and they're high up, but you look for movement. And this time of year, all the leaves are in, but they're very active. I don't know if you're going out in the morning, you can really hear them. And so, get out there, find a couple places to sit. If you have some binoculars, that's even better, because again, some of these birds are quite small, and that can help you. But there are some resources. So the Missouri Department of Conservation has a website that has a field guide. We also have some handouts we will give you today that will allow you to look at a bird, and you can use that handout and say, hey, I know what that is. Birding ID charts that are out there. You can find them all over the internet these days. But a really cool app that I've recently discovered as I started learning about this talk it's called Merlin. It's through Cornell University. And, again, if you have a phone, you can put it down on your phone, but it allows you to visually identify birds, or even cooler is the sound. So I walk through my neighborhood now holding my phone out, and it's telling me what birds are in the area. I can't necessarily see them, and I saw two, or I heard two, that were migratory. I'll show pictures of them later on, but I didn't even know they were in this area at this time of year. So it's been really cool and beneficial to kind of open the world of birding to myself. And then certainly there's a lot of birders out there. It's one of the more popular hobbies across North America, and I'm sure there's all kinds of resources, if you really want to get into birding and understanding where you can see these birds and the different types of birds. Next. Another feature I discovered on my personal phone, if you have an iPhone, if you get a good picture of a bird, it will pop up with a little icon, I'll call it, down at the bottom, and you click on that, and it will tell you what that bird is. Now, it has to be, what I've discovered, a really clear, crisp image, but, again, you may already have that feature if you have an iPhone. And like this was a red-bellied woodpecker that happened to be in my backyard, and it was just really cool that this tool helped me identify that. Next. So I'm going to ask you all a question. What do birds need? Right? So one of the things we can do as human beings is help birds. Because I'll give you a fact I just read this morning. We think we've lost over a third of all birds we used to have in North America. So our population has decreased dramatically. And you can do things to help kind of birds recover. So what do birds need? Food, water, shelter. The last one's always a little tricky. Space, right? They need habitat. And that's one of the challenges, right, all wildlife is facing, is they're seeing less and less available habitat. So even in small spaces like your backyard, you can do things to help with that, right? So bird feeders, and we'll talk about different types of bird feeders in a little bit. Bird baths, those, they use them to clean themselves, for water, and then space and habitat, native flowers, trees and bushes, and then brush piles. I really didn't think of that until recently when I joined the Missouri Department of Conservation, but it's another thing, if you have the space, let's say in a property, to build a small brush pile, it's amazing. I've done that, and it especially in the winter, it really attracts birds because it gives them some shelter, and it also protects them from predators. So it really, I found, is beneficial for birds if you can do that. And then obviously birdhouses. We're all familiar with birdhouse. And I have one in my backyard right now, and I'm so happy. A pair of eastern bluebirds have moved in. And so I'm really excited about that. Next. And this is an example of how bird baths can be extended throughout the year, right? So obviously in very cold weather, they'll freeze, but there are heaters out there that you can put into that bird bath, and it will keep it, free and flowing for the winter when birds really need water. Much harder for them to find water. And on the right, this is just a picture of how to build a brush pile. It's very simple. You lay down some larger branches, and then you just kind of build a teepee of smaller branches, just interlocking to give them enough space to get in there, but it also gives them a little protection and shelter. So. And the last thing that you can really help birds is keep your cats indoors. As we all know, cats, by their nature, that's just what they do. But if we can do something to alleviate that, because they are a big predation for native birds. So there are three types of, I'll call feeders out there. Obviously hummingbirds, and I'll talk a little bit more of them in another slide. Seed feeders are more common, right? And there's all different types of seeds, and we'll talk about that. And then the suet cages, when different types of birds will go towards certain type of things. You get the seed feeders that will attract those type of birds, and then your suet cages are more of your insectivores, like your woodpeckers, nuthatches, things like that. Now, I know you can't read this. It's very tiny. but I'll try to walk you through it. So when you're looking at your bird feeders, how many of you do bird feeders? Do any of you? And what seeds do you find the most beneficial, do you think, in your experience? Yeah.
I just use
Sunflower seeds?
safflower.
Oh, safflower, yeah, that's a good one. Anybody else have a
Old sunflower.
whole sunflowers, the black oil? Anybody else?
Just a good mix.
Just the mix. So, you know, on the right there is all the different species, and probably the most effective at getting the most number is anything to do with sunflower seeds, be it the full black oil or the heart of the sunflower. They tend to attract the majority of species, but the others are also, you know, can be effective in their own way. And the suet, you know, there's different types out there. I tend to look for ones that already have like mealworm or nuts or fruits and berries in them. Now there's some that just come a little more plain. Of course, they're a little cheaper, but I think, again, it's more effective at attracting certain birds and the nutrition of the different birds that are out there. Any of you have any other experiences in that area that you want to share besides, you know, the black oil, sunflowers, and things like that? Anything else that you've done? Anything differently?
In the wintertime, I get something to put the peanut butter in.
Oh, okay. Yes. Yeah.
Seeds mixed in,
Yes.
and you put it in a shell.
So that's a great activity for kids, right? So we've done that through our program where we, and you're a kid at heart, right? It's easy for them to make, right? We either peanut butter or vegetable shortening and then roll it in. Yes, yes. Now there is another critter out there that also loves coming to your bird feeder. The squirrels, right? So if you don't like them, I suggest finding feeders that have some squirrel proofing. I was just telling a story this morning. I have one that's supposed to be squirrel proof. You know, I've taken soap and I've lathered up the pole. I've taken vegetable oil, and they're fun for a while because they'll try and then they'll slide down. But you know, they'll figure a way, and they've come around and figure out a way to get on top of that thing. So now this one, because it's in more of a cage, it has kept them out. But they have gnawed, it's metal, and they have gnawed the heck out of the top of it trying to get in. It's unbelievable. So, but then you go some myths on bird feeders. One, they do not become reliant, right? So it only makes up a small portion of their diet anyway. And for some reason, if you miss putting it out for a period of time, it's not necessarily a catastrophic event, but it certainly helps augment their diet. Yeah. And then it doesn't interfere with migration. They're not going to stay around here longer in the fall. You know, it's really depending on the light of the day determines kind of when they leave an area. And they certainly don't smell, or us handling that feeder is in a way impacting their desire to go and eat that food. So, but these are some myths that, you know, people have thought when it comes to feeding. And then some features, and again, I apologize, it's a little small. So size, obviously when you look at a bird, you know, between an eagle and a sparrow, you know, there's a big difference there. It's harder when they're farther away, so you know, the challenge when I'm going down the road and you see a raptor fly over, you know, what raptor is that? And you know, plus you have vultures. But I guess the vultures have like the finger looking on their end of their wings, where the raptors do not have that. So that's one quick visual, as you can tell, between a vulture and a raptor. But then it gets challenging with the raptor because of the size and the color, and many times they're far away. But that's the easiest one I can say in terms of size. Then shape, you know, their beaks, their legs, etc. Their color, obviously we're very familiar with certain birds based on their color. We just talked about the eastern bluebird. You know, that's one. Behavior. How do they interact with the environment? I saw something the other day with my dad. 2 male cardinals, I guess it was a territorial dispute or a fight over a female, but one was out there, he was doing something I had never seen before with his feathers to the other one. The other one was just like looking at him, and then he flew off. So clearly that was the dominant, whatever that behavior was. He really told the other one to take a hike. Habitat, obviously, you know, if it's a water environment like a duck, that's going to be a lot different than something that's out in a drier environment or in a forest environment. Beak, the shape of the beak can be identifier, particularly the type of food they like to eat. And then the time of the year. You know, right now we're seeing these additional birds around here because of migratory patterns. So in February, that Cornell Labs that runs that Merlin app, they did a actually a global bird survey. They asked people to, you know, spend time observing birds somewhere for however long, and then count the number of birds and species that you observed. I did it over the course, I think it was 4 days. I only did it in 15-minute increments because it's quite hard to count the number of birds because obviously they're moving all over the place. But I think I ended up coming, and I live out in this direction south of here. I think there's either 10 or 12 different species in my backyard. So I was quite impressed. Because over the years I've lived out there, it's becoming more urban, and I've seen a drop in the number and the variety of species. So some birds I used to see years ago before development, I no longer see. So, yes?
What's your experience with geese as far as, like, we've had them blocking entrances at work,
Yeah.
golf courses, it's amazing. They seem to love it.
Well, we've built the perfect environment for them, right? You know, and you know, I think, and again, I'm not a geese expert, but you know, they were very migratory. They would move north in the winter or in the summertime and come back here in the winter. But now they're staying here year round, and I think we just made the perfect environment for them, right? We've got all this small water ponds. There's no vegetation around these ponds, which is what they really try to avoid because then they can't see predators. And so you'll find them, I'm sure if you ever go to Suisun Park, you know, they have those 3 lakes down there. There's not a lick of vegetation around them, and they're just all over the place. Golf courses are the same way. So I think that's a reflection on us. As humans, we have changed the environment to their liking. Yeah, and then they become comfortable with us, and they don't necessarily have the fear of humans, right? And so, but I tend to look at that as just they've adapted to the environment we've created. So, yeah. And they're very protective, I think. Yes?
The solution that my golf course has is we've got a black Scotty that rides around on the Marshall car and loves to just put him back in the water.
Yeah.
But then he runs right back up to his little cart and rides.
One of the most effective I've observed over the years, there's a golf course in Illinois, and they brought in 2 black swans. And you do not see geese around those ponds where those black swans are. And they're beautiful birds to watch. I mean, those swans are huge. But they keep them out of the area. They're, you know, so. I don't know if that's, you know, very effective. I've heard those birds are very expensive, so I don't know if all places can do that. And then we already just talked about time of year, so we'll go on to the next. So then we're going to have a little fun here, and we'll see how your bird knowledge is. So I'm going to kind of highlight a bird and ask the audience to tell me what bird that is. So we'll start with the upper left, the black and white with a little red. Woodpecker is correct, but what type of woodpecker? There we go, downy woodpecker. Very good. So then we'll go to the yellow one. Goldfinch. Boy, that's a good audience here. American goldfinch, by the way. And then the next one, on the middle, with the house finch. Boy, gentleman knows his birds right there. So yeah, they are ones that I love to watch. If you put up some, like even in the Christmas time, if you put some garland up around your windows, or they'll go in there and use that in the winter as a place to live. The next one, this is a real challenge. No, the lower one. No, it's a sparrow. These are extremely difficult for me personally, right? So this is a chipping sparrow. You know, there's house sparrows. I mean, there's a plethora of different. One of the interesting things, though, there is a sparrow around this St. Louis area. It's only found around St. Louis area. and it's not native. It's the Eurasian sparrow. And for whatever reason, it got introduced here in the 1890s, I think, or 1870s, but it's pretty much stayed in the St. Louis area. But you're familiar with starlings. They were introduced, about 100 birds in New York City, Central Park, in like 1890s, and they have spread across the entire United States. There are 200 million of them. The interesting fact is they're all genetically identical, which is highly unusual for a species, right? Because if a disease hits, typically you don't all have the same genetic makeup, but for whatever reason, they've been very successful. So, and then obviously we all know this one, right? I mean, if you like the baseball cardinal. So now we'll start on that. Somebody already had this one earlier. Had named this one already. There you go, white-breasted nuthatch. And then we've got this one on the left. There you go, red-bellied woodpecker. And then we've got, yeah, I think you already said this one. Well, this one's the Carolina chickadee, but there is a black-cap. It's a chickadee. There are two types, but they're very, very difficult to tell the difference. As I've read, I don't. What do we got at the bottom there? That's right, it is the Missouri State bird. It's the eastern bluebird. And then the one on the right top. No. Tuft titmouse. All right, so it's kind of got the same shape as a blue jay. Now, if you notice about the tuft titmouse, if you can see that beak, you can see it's kind of triangular shape. That tends to be what seed eaters have. Obviously, when you look at a woodpecker with the long, they're more of an insectivore. So that's another way to kind of identify the type of foods they eat really by their beak. So here are some birds that you may be less familiar with, but they migrate either here for breeding or they migrate through. The yellow warbler, and these are very hard to see. I know they go through Tower Grove. I have a friend of mine who is into warblers, and he goes to Tower Grove to look at warblers. That eastern phoebe was one I told you I just recorded on my phone. I heard, I'm listening, and it's going, oh, eastern phoebe. So they are a migratory bird, and they're in this area. I could not see it, but I could hear it. Same with the brown thrasher. That's another one that migrates into the area that I did not see, but that app picked up the sound of its song. So I thought that was really cool. And then you've got the indigo bunting, which I don't see as much around here as I used to. Do you? Oh, okay.
One day, and then not the next day, but the next day. And then it came back the next year one time.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
Yeah.
They really are. I wish I'd see more of those. And then you've got the yellow-throated viero, which again, I don't see those as much, if at all, anymore. Now, the interesting about migration, we're in the Midwest. I think it's the Midwest Flyway, right? So it's the largest. There's 4 flyways for migratory birds north to south across the United States. The largest one goes up the Mississippi Flyway. That's what it's called. And unfortunately, they estimate about 1 million birds a year are killed on that flyway due to outdoor lighting, the light pollution. It disorients them. They go into building windows, what have you. So one of the pushes, and you may have heard this, they already do this with the arch, is they turn off the arch lights here in the spring and then in the fall for that migration period. Again, if you're out there and everybody's adding all this outdoor lighting around their houses, but the point is how you do that, if you're using the right light color or how you're directing it, but it can impact, unfortunately, birds. And then hummingbirds. These are some of my favorite. We only have one that comes here, migration in the summer. It's the ruby-throated hummingbird. They're tiny, but they are mighty. If you ever watch them around, they're very territorial. They will really go after each other. They're fun to watch. But one way to attract them, and those of you who may have successfully been able to bring them to your house, native flowers, I think, can really help. That's one of my goals, is to put more native plants in around my home with the hope of attracting a bird like this. And then sugar for their food. I know you can buy the commercial product. It's red already and liquid, but it's highly advisable. They don't like it, and it's not good for them. Just take plain sugar, 1 part sugar, 4 parts of water, and mix it up. Do you have any other way you do things? Is that how you do it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I warm it till make sure the sugar's all dissolved and then put it in a jar.
Okay. And you change it pretty frequently, right?
Yeah.
Is that a weekly?
Or even if it's really hot, it should be changed more.
There you go. Yeah, you don't want it to build up any kind of bacteria or mold and things like that. So there is an obligation a little bit when you go into the hummingbird to make sure you're giving them good food and giving them something that's not going to make them sick. And speaking of that, I didn't really even talk about that back when we were talking about the seeds. As you know, we have avian influenza going around. And wild birds are carriers, but the good news is only about 7% of native birds are carriers, are impacted by that influenza. So they've built up an immunity to it. But you can still help mitigate that by, frequently cleaning your feeders. Because again, it just becomes and changing the soil or the underneath it, mixing that up because of their droppings, right? So anything you can do to kind of refresh that environment is beneficial. Yeah.
I wanted to say though, on my iPad I saw the squirrel get up into the feeder, but it was a new feeder, and it twirled the squirrel around like crazy, and it flipped off, and then it staggered all around.
Got a little dizzy?
It was funny. It was a new feeder they're selling.
Yeah. It's yeah. No, they are amazing little creatures. I know people kind of derogatory, but they are. Yeah, they do. And again, we just talked about don't use honey or artificial sweeteners, everything. Try to keep it natural when it comes to attracting. And I think the time to put out these feeders is coming up in a week or two. It's like the end of April, like April 25th. I think if you go on the Missouri Department of Conservation website, they recommend around April 25th to first put out your hummingbird feeders. Now you might not see any immediately, and just don't leave your feeder out there unattended. You clean it. So it's a process as I understand it. My mom was really good at attracting at her house. I think, and then we're going to have another way. So visually we've talked about, and then we've talked about you can hear things. So now we're going to play some bird sounds and see if you can figure out which sound goes with which bird. So we'll see how this goes. Blue jay. Yep. So we have the next one. So it's similar to a blackbird, but it's actually also a blue jay. So birds don't have a single call. Not all birds have a single call. They have different calls depending on a different behavior. I think the blue jay, I don't know how many total. I was able to find like 4 maybe different calls that they have out there.
You don't even see them anymore.
I've seen a few in this winter, but yeah, I don't see them as much as I used to. Yeah.
Buy the peanuts in the shell.
I like those. Yeah. We have another one, another call. Now this is a bird you don't see too much in the suburban, urban environment. It's really if you're more out towards farms, and especially if you're like in Illinois, by Columbia where there's a lot of farmland still. That's the red-winged blackbird. So you'll see, and again, they have multiple different calls, but that's the one I'm most familiar hearing, and I hear when I'm on the golf course. And then the last one. That's the finch, and obviously that's a beautiful, that's what the songbird call, really enjoy that. And it's a long, it's a long call, but complex in its different tones and inclinations. But, yep, that's American goldfish. So in conclusion, we'll go on to the next slide. So, There we go. So when I'm trying to convey, I'm sure, from the folks in here, you've had bird feeders out that you must enjoy then observing and watching birds, but I really do, and so some of the things, it gives me a chance to connect with nature, right? Just by living in that moment, taking 15 minutes out of my day and looking out and watching them interact, it kind of calms me, relaxes me. It can also, in my view, help with mental health, reduce stress, improve concentration. Because as I said, I participated in that bird count, and it took me some time to really concentrate, especially when you have all these different sparrows zipping along the ground trying to count them and so forth. And then for me, it's discovering new things. I just mentioned using that app, I discovered these two birds that I was not familiar with, but through their sound, they're in my neighborhood. So I thought, hey, I've learned something new that I didn't know. So help me identify using their behaviors, their sounds, and these science count events. So on May 1st through the 15th, the Missouri Department of Conservation is doing its first community, I'll call it bird count. So it's based like forming a team, and there's prize money. I remember all the details, but if you're interested, it's May 1st. You can go out to the Missouri Department of Conservation. They just sent out another email on it to us this morning. So if that's something you might be interested, I encourage you to look into it and maybe get involved. So that's the end of my talk. Any other questions or comments? Yes, ma'am.
How do you keep the sparrows out of the bluebird house?
That's a good question. I think I've been fortunate in mine. I have, but as I understand it, the hole size is a key factor. And so I know, like, mine was a purposely built bluebird house rather than a general birdhouse. But yeah. Now, the other thing I have noticed or read with the bluebirds, they will start looking for where they want to nest in February. So it's actually so I've been watching these pair for weeks, thinking, are they going to buy? Are they moving in? Are they moving in? And finally, the other day, I saw them starting to fly in and out of there. But it took a number of weeks. So I don't know, again, having it up early enough in the season, and then when they're done, I think they're all out of there by the end of the summer and the fall. Then I open it up, clean it all out. But other than that, I'm not sure of, birds will be birds, and it's a dog eat dog out there, as they say. Unless you go out there and, pull the sparrows out, but I tend to not want to do that. Yes.
Maybe they can look on the internet to see the size. My son just built about 5 new
Yeah.
bird houses because when he moved in, the other family had the old ones and they were falling apart, so he just built 5 new ones.
The other one, did you put up all 5 in the same kind of area? Because I always thought they had to have a bigger territory. But
It's got a lot of
okay.
a big backyard.
Oh, okay.
He still lives, in a subdivision.
Yeah.
He has a good sized backyard.
Yeah.
So he's got plenty of room to space them out.
Like you said, you can always go to the internet. And I think did you have a comment? Yeah. I think they're mostly insectivores, worms or other type of insects. Now, occasionally in the winter, they were more migratory bird. They would head south, but I think because we're having warmer winters, we'll now start seeing them, at least I have, through the winter months, and they will show up at feeders. I don't know exactly if they're the suet or, I don't think they're the suet because I don't see them up in the trees. They're still on the ground.
They like the berries.
But yeah, if you have things maybe things like that might keep them around, yeah.
The tree across from me has a berry tree. I don't know what kind it was. I saw one time 20 or 30 robins.
Okay.
The whole bottom.
And I know that they like holly. Holly has berries.
Well, holly is a good one, but this is
Yeah.
a little tree.
Okay. But I think they're
Red berries.
primarily insectivores, but again, birds will adapt, and there'll be other foods that if they have to get through a period of stretch of time. Yeah. Yes.
So last summer, late fall, early fall,
Yeah.
Maybe down into the backyard altogether. And then when I went out, they all took off again, never came back again. Once they're,
So I think that's most likely, I think it's starlings. That's when I usually see them in a big, especially in the winter, they aggregate together. But I can't be for sure. And you know, they're moving. You know, they're just searching food, and they will move in large groups like that. Especially as if you're out in the fields of a farm, it's either a big red-winged blackbirds, or you see these large groups of starlings. I don't see grackles too much in larger groups. I tend to see them smaller. Yes?
I have a lot of wild honeysuckle trees that surround my backyard. And in the fall, they get red berries.
Yeah.
Birds don't even fly.
They're not native. That honeysuckle is not a native plant to North America. It's a non-native species. It's invasive, and it's very difficult to eradicate. I've tried, and I know there's programs they'll ask for volunteers to go to parks, but yeah, because it's not really a native plant, birds don't necessarily have adapted to that as a food source. But unfortunately, it's everywhere.
Well, I like them.
They smell good, but
Yeah, they do. And the deer like to eat the honeysuckle leaves in the spring when
yeah.
they're grown. But the birds never eat those red berries. And I think, golly, there's so many red berries on
Yeah.
honeysuckle. I wonder if they were poisonous or what.
It could be. I don't know that part. I just know they're non-native. So again, until, you know, some animals will explore, I guess, and find out, oh, I can eat that or I can't eat, but maybe they don't. Yes?
I used to see cedar waxwings in my backyard for a while. I haven't seen any lately. They're kind of going away.
Yeah, on specific birds, I don't know. As I said, I think my anecdotal observation where I live is the number of species has certainly dropped from when I first moved into this area. When I first moved where I'm at now, it was more forested and rural, less suburban. And over the years, you know, a lot more development has happened. I just think it's loss of habitat. So as I said, they estimate a third of our bird population across North America. So it's I guess I should say I'm not surprised, unfortunately. Yes?
Cedar waxwings, I think, are migratory because I used to have a pine tree in my front
Hmm.
yard. And 2 or 3 days, they come and eat all those berries, and then they're gone. And then in the fall, they come back.
That certainly is a point. If they're a migratory, the window of seeing them is much smaller. But as I said, in general, it could be just fewer birds. Yeah.
How are the eagles doing?
You know, I haven't checked recently, so I don't take this as the truth, but I think they're recovering. You know, I'm not sure if they're even still on the threatened. They may be off of that. You'd have to look that up. I think people are more aware and more protective. Unfortunately, you still have people that will shoot them. God knows why. They're just out of spite. But I think, you know, getting rid of some of the pesticides in the environment has helped with their recovery. But I see them now here. There's a pair, I think there still might be, I haven't checked this year, over at Simpson Park, there in Valley Park. There is a nesting pair there. I haven't looked this year to see if they're still there. Yes?
I came late.
Oh, that's,
Anyway, are there fewer birds these days?
yeah, I'm just reading something that I read through the Missouri Department of Conservation. There is a estimation. That's why they do these bird counts. So if you ever have a chance to do one, you are contributing to the knowledge of the collective over how many birds. And it's a very simple activity to do. They've set up, especially that Cornell lab, it's simply, you just load up your information on the website. But in general, I would say, yes, the feeling is we've lost a third of our overall wild bird population in North America. Yeah.
They're air spraying in the air, and has that affected the bird thinking?
I think there's a lot of factors. I mean, we've expanded more, right? We're more urban. We put more things into the environment that may not be beneficial to wildlife, like pesticides. I mean, I think pesticides do have an impact on bird populations. We saw that with DDT and eagles. That was one specific example. But I think in general, when we do things in the environment, change it, add non-natural things to it, we're impacting that environment and animals don't necessarily have the ability to evolve and adapt to these changes that happen so quickly. Yeah.
It seems like I remember something on TV about a group of pigeons downtown mysteriously dropping out of the sky or something, and then never heard more. Like, did they ever figure out what the heck happened?
I've not heard of that. I know and again, they had introduced a pair of, was it the peregrine falcon, into downtown, and they will eat pigeons. Now, in this particular case, I don't know if that's what happened to them, and I don't even know how well that pair is doing. But they were there at one time as a way to help control the pigeon population, a natural way. Yes.
Yeah, I have sparrows that are nesting where I don't want them to nest. If I get one of those sculpture statues of an owl and place it in a prominent spot, does that help, or is that just?
I have it might. I can't say for sure. Certainly, it's a lot of people try to use those as a way to keep certain birds out of certain areas. I know you were talking about the Canadian geese earlier. There's a church out here on 30. It's the real large one if you're going out to the west. South. If you look out, you'll see they have fox profiles out in that field as a way to try to keep the Canadian geese away. But, I don't know if owls are necessarily something that sparrows. Now, if you did a Cooper's hawk eat sparrows. I mean, I've seen them around my house. I've seen them get them out of my trees. I had one poor sparrow and just slammed in my window trying to get away from one. So if you find one out there of a Cooper's hawk, maybe that might work.
And just a follow-up question, do the sparrows stay year-round? Stay year-round?
I think most of our sparrow species are, there might be some migratory. I'm not an expert in sparrows. There's so many different varieties. You probably have a house sparrow, so house sparrows and Eurasian sparrows are non-native. So they were introduced by man into the U.S. and become very successful. So if it's one of those, they tend to stay here year-round. I mean,
Nest, like, mine are probably nesting like 3, maybe even 4 times a year.
they could, yeah. A lot of these birds have multiple broods a year. I mean, again, that's their main driver, trying to keep their population going. So, I mean, now I don't know if they come back to the same spot. Like bluebirds, I think will tend to come back if they find a house. They'll many times come back, the same pair. I don't know about sparrows. I don't know about them
Seem like they're living there
all the time.
around.
Well, the other thing that, frankly, is trying to, they stay because, one, they have space, they have the habitat. The other thing is the food. So if there's some food you're putting out or there's some plant that they're eating, I don't want to say dramatically, but you take away that food source, they may not stay around. So, yes? Yes. Yes. They're a little larger, than your smaller songbirds. They're kind of a gray. They pretty much stay on the ground. You look at the morning bird, if you ever watch them, they just look like they're not the brightest birds in the world. I mean, they will just nest on a couple twigs right on just in the most craziest spots. But clearly they're successful. They're still around, but they're funny to watch. Yeah.
I used to have 4 bird houses hanging from my trees in the backyard, and I noticed in the summer, sometimes they weren't there. I went to Home Depot, and it was in their bird sanctuary, the outdoor space place, and all the birds were eating, and they said, that's where my birds went. And so they go back and forth,
Yeah.
because it was just on the block.
Right. Yeah, yeah. If you'll go to a Home Depot or Lowe's, sometimes you'll see them inside the store, for food. But yeah, the mourning doves, they'll sometimes land on a little sill right outside my window, and they're just cooing like crazy. Yeah, they're interesting little birds. Yeah.
The birds on the wires,
Hmm.
are they all the same type of bird or just any?
I've seen doves do that behavior of up along the line. I've seen starlings do that.
Because a lot of them will just leave
Yeah.
the group.
Yeah. Typically that's the starlings. If they're black birds, relatively maybe about this size, that's typically starling. They are the ones in the big groups. Now they'll split off when they're breeding, and you'll see them in ones and twos and so forth. But many times, most of the time, they're in big flocks like that. Yes.
If you get over 100 crows on a wire, you're in a Hitchcock movie.
Yeah.
I'm out of there.
Yeah.
Bird and crows.
Yes, ma'am.
I have two feeders, suction cup feeders on my windows. I get birds all year round,
Yeah.
every time. And how I got doves, they'll be up on the wires. It might be empty, I put a little food in there too.
Yeah.
And, cardinals and bluebirds and finch, just sparrows.
Yeah.
And everything, it's just awesome.
Yeah. I've looked at those. So squirrels. Yeah, the one thing that I'm always cognizant of, and I'm trying to think better ways to do it, every once in a while, unfortunately, a bird will hit my window. Most of the time, they'll hit it and they'll be fine. But I do know I need to think more about, sometimes the people are putting up those decals of like other birds, especially predatory birds on their windows. There's a film that's, if you really want to go to extreme, that birds can see infrared that we can't. So they'll see that film, but you don't see it. So there are strategies out there to, again, kind of help birds survive when you think about windows. So if you do have birds hitting a lot of your windows, because you'll hear them, you might want to think about, is there some way to maybe change something to help the birds? Yes, ma'am.
A lot of times, maybe a cardinal is in feeding, and the sparrows will come up, and that cardinal just gives them a
Yeah.
pinch. They're gone.
Yeah, the cardinals tend to dominate feeders when they're on them. Yeah.
A lot of birds, will still do that same thing, that, I'm here, just leave me alone.
The jays, when they're on a feeder, they dominate.
I didn't used to have blue jays come and feed, but now
They're coming. Yeah. Any other questions or comments? I've enjoyed listening to your stories. Yeah, Jan?
I just want to add one thing. If you all want to help the birds, really simple, don't get your leaves cleared off until April 1st. That's where the insects hide that the birds feed on.
That's a good point.
Just wait till in fact, I think it's Oakland passed a law that it can't take their leaves up until after April 1st for that very reason. And by April 1st, a lot of those leaves have started to decompose.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. It's a good food source. Well, thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoyed it, and have a good rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff and Jan. I appreciate you coming out. And Jan, you have some handouts. Thank you. Lunch is downstairs, and you can take either the elevator if you need to get your 10,000 steps in. We got the steps right at the end of the hall. Thanks a lot. Thanks for coming.